Kia ora, everyone. We often wonder why some children struggle so much to understand mathematical concepts. We particularly struggle to understand why seemingly simple um, concepts, such as early basic facts within five, with five, are just so difficult for some children. And years ago, when we were teaching um, with the numeracy framework, the numeracy project, which at the time we knew no different. We weren't really developing an understanding of how children come to be able to work in the abstract, which is what a basic fact is when presented in that equation form that's written down, that algorithm, however you want to picture that, that is an abstract form. And we worked on, I think, and I really struggle to remember the stages now, but there was the emergent counters. There was the one-to-one counters, the counting all counters. And then we came to this mystical stage of imaging. And people said, oh, well, don't worry. Some children just won't image. And then we went on to advanced counting. And the real problem is in the fact that some people thought that some children just wouldn't image and for some reason that wasn't important. We could just move them on. Um, Now what we know is mathematics is hierarchical, and so we layer learning on top of foundations, and it's very much learnt in quite a sequential way. Now, to say that children don't image is interesting because it reminds me of when we started the structured literacy journey, um, what seems like forever ago now. I did wonder why some children seemingly were just natural readers. Surely they weren't orthographically mapping those words, they just knew them. What I didn't understand is that they were doing that so quickly, like we do that so quickly now that you didn't know that that's what was going on. Now, so there were two kind of camps with those imaging, right? Children that, for whatever reason, mathematics was a language that came easily to them, is developed quite easily. They had a really strong sense of value, whatever it looked like. They didn't seem to be imaging because they just knew it. I don't know how many children over the time had said to me, just knew it. Um, so they were imaging. They did have a visual framework of what that was, but they did just know it because they were doing it so quickly that they weren't relying on that visual schema that some children needed. Then you had the other camp of those children where they weren't imaging because they didn't have a visual image, concrete. They hadn't built a schema of what that actually was, right? And so to say that children didn't need that was false. Anyway, I don't want to get stuck up on that, but I wanted to talk about the children that didn't have that visual framework and how that relates to the why of the scope and sequence, and then how that relates to basic facts. So, what the scope and sequence does, because it is initially has been based on the work of Christopher Wooden, and he does some amazing work, particularly directed at children that have difficulties with learning number and dyscalculia or similar math struggles. And those patterns and the learning that I did as part of that um, taught me and helped me understand that some children just don't understand that number So that two, what that actually represents, that it has a quantity. And they struggle to understand that. They struggle to create a schema for that. Okay, and so they don't have anything to hang their hat on. So they can work with concrete items. They can get to the point of, okay, I know that's two. And in the old, in the old way of teaching, very much encouraging that counting of that. Obviously, now with what I know about mathematics, my children are supervising groups and then joining together. So conceptually and perceptually. So perceptual, I understand that's four, and I can conceptually join that four to four to know it's eight. I don't need to count all of that. I just know it because I've got a strong reference for it. I understand that that's the value. I've worked with that a lot of times. And then I can have the four and the three, and I can relate that understanding to four and four, and I can build on that. So the more I have, the more knowledge I have, the more knowledge I can create and understand and embed. So layering upon layering. Now, for some children, they cannot do that. And that understanding of pattern, that spatial awareness, I was that child, that understanding that numeral has a value seems very simple to us, but it is a concept many children have not got. And because they have specific struggles, they need it to be taught. Okay, that's where these patterns come in. And so the scope and sequence builds these patterns, and you'll see them referred to as Hungarian frames as well. And there's a lot of practitioners out there that will present them in different ways. In essence, they all look the same. And they give children a visual framework to build a schema of quantity upon. Okay, so they can be working with these patterns in a concrete form that helps them to build up their visual schema, their pictorial understanding. There's the imaging, okay, and that imaging assists them to get to the abstract. The way the scope and sequence works is it builds that sense of quantity is related to the pattern up slowly to the point that eventually children, because we know that they can supervise to four, and if arranged in a neat way, there's a few ways that my children will see five instantly now over and beside the wooden pattern, but that's because they've developed an understanding of three and two. But so if you can arrange the five in a way that's easy, they'll supervise that as well. More so because it's arranged in a way that they recognize as five. So we're told that the brain can supervise up to four easily. Beyond that is more difficult. And so I think in the old framework, we were talking about supervising to six. Well, unless that's arranged in a way and a child has a visual link and a visual schema for that, that would be incredibly difficult. So four definitely is instant and it works, and then five if arranged in a pattern. Now, what the wooden patterns do is they build on that the fact that supervising isn't just about perceptual, so just that scene, but is also conceptual. And I've heard a lot of practitioners call it groupitizing now. I kind of like that, and just because I love the language of it. But conceptually, I could then add that four to the one to know the five. I could add the five to the one to know the six. So I'm not actually recognizing the six instantly, but I'm seeing the five and the one, and I'm joining them together to know six. So the scope and sequence builds that deep understanding. It builds it slowly. It isn't intended to be a process that slowly builds those strong foundations. Go slow initially to what I've seen. If we go slow and we've got lovely foundations, the children eventually their progress becomes more rapid. So go slow to go far, that kind of thing. So what the wooden patterns will give is a visual framework. So we're working in a concrete way, children are building them. They've got their five, they understand there's five ones inside of there. there's one 4 inside of the 5 and one remaining. Inside the 5, there's a 3 and a 2. Inside of the 5, there are two 2s and a 1. And they're working with that. They understand the, the groupings inside the pattern. They build those understandings up. They build that deep sense. So eventually those patterns to 10 are instant. Okay, we want it instant. We want it to be. So children that wouldn't have previously been able to do that before, the wooden patterns give them that framework to build that schema on, and that's the gift. Okay, so for children that were like me, maths was a struggle. If I'd had those wooden patterns to hang my hat on, I think that working in a more abstract way would have been far easier for me. Now, I've talked before in videos about how that bridges into the teen, into working with multiplication, but today I just wanted to look at how that bridges to helping basic facts. So if we look here, and I've just got one pattern here, and this is the pattern. Obviously, it's 10. It's a whole 10. We're going to look at those colors, and children, obviously, they've worked with us a lot, okay? So they know that they can see the 7 and they can see the 3. They know that is 10. The way this works for their bridging to basic facts means that they can see that's actually the addition there. So I could write how many reds, well, there are 7. How many yellows, there are 3. I could record that down. This pattern is a scaffold. It's a visual reference. I can write it in the abstract form. Eventually, I can take the visual reference away and I will know 7 and 3. My mind, my brain will see this. This will be what I hang my hat on. So say this was the pattern for 6 and we were working with 5. They'd see the 5 and the 1. And they'd understand if we wrote that in a more abstract way, 5 plus 1, we know that was 6. We eventually can take that pattern away. But this is that imaging point. These are the visual reference points that children that won't ever image can use, because we should be concerned about that. If children cannot develop a visual schema of something to understand what it actually means, then it's going to be really, really difficult for them. Okay, this gives them an understanding what addition is, and obviously we can explore difference here as well. But that's the whole point. Okay, so children that do that quickly and they seem to work through the patterns, and then you get to the abstract point where we're doing some addition, developing that, doing some little bit of retrieval practice. My children will have the cards out there if they need them. Some children won't need that. The reason they don't need that is they've built that visual schema. They've got it. It's easy for them to understand it. Okay, so you'll see some children will, they'll have the 8 there and then they'll rearrange it as 4 and 4. They understand that they are the same thing. For other children, that has to be explicitly linked up, and that's okay too. So I just wanted to show the point of the patterns and to say that we all should be encouraged to image, and that it is incredibly important. And it should have been put at the first step, before that emergent counting, before the all counting all, and that imaging should have been the first step that children were encouraged to go through. And that's where the scope and sequence puts it. Okay, we're developing that visual schema as related to the quantity that number symbolizes, because I need to be able to know that when I see the 4, I see that number, I can then visualize 3 and 1, 2 and 2, 4 and 0. I can see it. I can pull it apart in here. I've got that pattern. So children will have had their 4. They will have turned 1 over. What can you see? They will have turned 2 over. What can you see? They will have seen patterns for that 4, worked with it so that they can build that schema. My Tier 2 learners, my class, the majority, bonds to 10, all of that is instant and automatic now. And my tier 2 learners, they will still have those cards sitting next to them. That is okay. I don't expect them to just get this by osmosis. We will sit there. We will say how many reds, how many. They know that is 10. We now, what else how can we build to the abstract? Because that's where we're getting. But they will have those cards. Another useful way is to have them on a number line as well. So that's why those patterns are important. That's why the scope and sequence is based on them. That's why we take time and we work slowly and we're not in a rush, because we will go slow to go far, slow down to speed up. Okay, eventually that progress will become more rapid. These beautiful patterns will lead them very naturally into those 4 operations with relative ease. And if not, they are a fantastic tool to assist our tier 2 learners as well. Ka kite.